Language always shifts and changes, but the direction of that change, whether growth or stupefaction, tells us something about where the culture is heading. And here we are at present, simplifying win and loss to a W or an L. To preface, this video isn't a slight at Gen Z or Alpha or even Millennials, but we do take on the dumbest of languages and bring it down lower. Language doesn't evolve randomly, it adapts alongside society, and when culture expands, language grows to match it, as seen in every age of innovation. But when society contracts or dulls, so does the language. We are now back to the linguistic dark ages of vague words and middling comprehension. People think in words. Even visual thinkers and artists rely on internal language to frame and articulate their ideas. If our vocabulary narrows, so does the precision of our thought. This affects everything from how we argue to write or create. Currently, we have fewer words with less precision each. Honestly, try looking at the dictionary on your computer or phone. Most words now are only shown as a synonym for another without any meaningful distinction. For example, daft means silly, foolish, or eccentric. Foolish means unwise, and unwise means foolish. Eccentric gets a little bit more with slightly strange. Webster's 1828 dictionary, luckily available online, defines eccentric 4 ways, as it had multiple meanings, mostly related to geometry and deviation from the center of a circle. Of those 4, we now only use one. That is, deviating from stated methods, usual practice, or established forms or law, irregular, anomalous, departing from the usual course. Or, for us dumbed down masses, slightly strange. Is this something you've noticed too whenever you try to look up an unfamiliar term? Let me know in the comments. The obvious reason for this is brevity. Speed is the way of computers, and thus our future. But it's hardly a convincing argument that it's worth trading depth and clarity of thought for a little more computing power. Limiting your vocabulary, not engaging with new words and the ideas they describe, is another way of dulling your thinking. Your smartphone, of course, does its best with this, and it does most of the heavy lifting, making life as simple and frictionless as possible, but you really can't expect it to do all the heavy lifting. Instead, the media we all consume further limits the depth and breadth of language we hear and learn for our understanding of the world, our community, and ourselves. Even shows and movies 50 years ago carry a wider vocabulary than the default now, and they're dull compared to older plays and books. Look at shows like The Golden Girls, or MASH, or A-Team, 1940s Mark of Zorro, or the 1944 Since You Went Away. Both are personal favorites of mine, and also happen to be available for free on YouTube, the last I checked anyway. None of these shows are obtuse or perplexing to understand, but if you listen to the language used, there's greater variety and more vocabulary used for everyday conversations than what we hear in our shows today, much less use in our own real interactions. This reaction to the language we take in is noticeable even on a small scale. We've all probably caught ourselves talking more like the characters of shows we just binged or creators we see often on YouTube or TikTok. This is a human manner of socialization, but if the only media you consume is brain rot or content made by creators with the same or more limited vocabulary than yourself, then you start thinking in an increasingly limited manner with fewer words available to you to articulate your ideas. Side note, if you like any of the art in this video, including what's in the background, they're available in prints and some of the originals on my website or Etsy shop, both are linked below. When culture grows, it creates new ideas and thus new words. The Renaissance had a boom in language that lasted centuries and continued producing new ideas that needed new words. Sfumato, fresco, maestro are some, but perspective, mannerism, humanism, these are a fraction of the new words that were invented then that we still use today. Look at Leonardo da Vinci's work. He may not have come up with the word for helicopter yet, but he had the idea. The Industrial Revolution was another clear time of innovation and growth that we've just started tapering off from these last couple decades. Computers and AI, of course, are our time's new ideas, and they have new words, but only a few, like computation, have made it into normal rotation, and that's still not used very often in everyday conversation. Most computer terms are just stolen mashups of what was already available. Things like programs, hash, scripts, quantum computing, code. These words all already existed on their own, and now they just mean a new thing if you're on the inside of the tech world, and something else if you're outside. They aren't actually new. When culture starts to stagnate or decline, new slang may appear, but it simplifies existing words rather than adding new meaning. Charisma became too complex and changed to game, and now Riz. Much easier to say with as little meaning as possible. All innovative words now are related to technology. There's nothing new for art, writing, poetry, i.e. culture. We read old texts and flatten them in translation because we no longer have the language to make distinctions. For example, ancient Greek had many distinct words for love. You had eros, agape, pragma, and many others. Each one had a distinct meaning. Today, we have one vague term that defaults to eros, or sexual love. If you mean something different, you have to quantify that with something like love someone like a sister or brother, or platonic love. Greeks had a term for platonic love. It was philia. It was used for friendship or the brotherly bond between soldiers on a battlefield. Today, we just call that gay because, again, everything with love has to default to sex. I always marvel at how far we've come in a circle to only appreciate biology. Again. Words like acquiesced, maelstrom, seed, juxtapose still exist, but they've fallen far out of common use.
I'm disinclined to acquiesce to your request.
We use between 5,000 and 6,000 common words for most communication on average, out of 0.5 to 1 million words in the English language. Educated now is considered 15,000 words. Of course, the average person doesn't need 1 million different words every day, but you're also not rolling in original thought and creative ideas with only a, fine, the, like, cap, moron. The result of such a limited vocabulary is that communication is now blunt. Everything said is vague, nigh on meaningless. As I mentioned in some of my previous videos about abstract art, which will be linked somewhere, those vague terms can make for easy compliments. Complex, carrying moral distinction. Strong colors, dynamic. What do these words mean? It doesn't really matter, they can be applied to anything. And it's vague enough, if you want, you can infer meaning. And if you don't, well, you're just part of the unenlightened masses who just don't get it. We've lost the use of reasonable terms to describe what we see, much less what we think. Now we use the same half-dozen vague terms for everything. Slang is normal and fun. Every generation has cycled through variants that were hip for that generation or less and then replaced with new ones. But modern trends favor simplification of existing words rather than inventing new ones or creating new meanings. Phrases like, I can't even. The millennial phrase technically is just foreshortened. It's 1 degree removed from sensical English. We just dropped the defining word of what we're trying to say. Compare that to Gen Z's it's giving. This is 2 degrees removed from any meaningful language and has all the personhood taken out of it. Instead of saying, I perceive this to be XYZ, it's now giving, I don't have an intelligent opinion. Mixed in with other Gen Z slang, like it's giving brat or baby doll. And now we've arrived at word salad. If you're part of this generation and think these phrases have more meaning to them than this, you can let me know in the comments. I'll argue this all day. This isn't meant as criticism of Gen Z or millennial, as I said at the start. Our linguistic capabilities have been declining for many a decades at this point, and the most recent generations have just inherited this downward trend and shifted it around a little, as every generation does, adding our own nonsense, but we haven't offered any growth. Side note, my new novelette book is scheduled to be released the 27th. If you're interested, there's a video linked below introducing the main character. The pre-sale page and my newsletter are in the description as well. We have an amusing little idea that modern humans are more intelligent than any of our ancestors. After all, we have microwaves, cars, cancer, obesity, things our silly old ancestors never would have thought of. And anyone who's figured out how to enslave a population with debt rather than chains obviously has to be more intelligent. However, speaking as recently as early American history, education, that is to mean learning to think, not our modern variant, learning to obey, was of national importance. Paine's Common Sense, written for lay people, has vocabulary and sentence structure that is challenging for today. Here's a random section from where I happen to pick it up. Debts we have none, and whatever we may contract on this account will serve as a glorious memento of our virtue. Can we but leave posterity with a settled form of government, an independent constitution of its own, the purchase at any price will be cheap. But to expend millions for the sake of getting a few vile acts repealed and rooting the present ministry only is unworthy the charge, and is leaving posterity with the utmost cruelty, because it is leaving them a great work to do, and a debt settled upon their back from which they derive no advantage. Such a thought's unworthy a man of honor, and is the true characteristic of a narrow heart and a piddling politician. There is a paragraph. This book was for the masses, like the Federalist or Anti-Federalist papers. This was the level of the common farmer, the educated working class, because this country's founders believed that an educated populace cannot be easily deceived or made to act contrary to their own best wishes. You can look around at the world today and figure out for yourself whether or not they were onto something. Well, on the idea of not being so depressing, here are some easy peasy ways anyone can go about improving their vocabulary. It's so easy, in fact, I know practically no one will do it. Here it is. Read something. Particularly books written more than 70 years ago. You can even watch older shows or movies as an added fun time, but of course, books are best. And of course, the older the better, since we have gotten progressively duller in our manner of speaking and writing. See there? So easy. You don't even have to put more than 10 minutes a day into improving your thinking or articulating yourself. And no one likes easy, accessible solutions that require actual immediate effort. A step beyond that might be limiting the amount of dumb information you take in on your everyday from your social media feed. And beyond that even, read with friends, start a book club, discuss. Be social. I know it sucks at first, but it always ends up worth it. Language always changes, but it doesn't always change for the better. When vocabulary shrinks, so does our capacity to express ideas or even think them up, and forget about conveying those ideas to others in a comprehensive manner without ruffling feathers. Creators can fight back, but it's not by resisting change, but it's by resisting the simplification. Use the whole language. There are words you've never even heard of to describe things you experience every day. Read widely. Write clearly, or create if that's what you do. Bring back meaning to the words you use, and use the words that you mean.
And for gosh sake, watch your language.
Well, that's all for me. Comment and subscribe if you so choose, or don't. And ciao ciao for now.